Welcome to Jury Conversations. I am Ingrid Spencer, Executive Director for AIA Austin and the Austin Foundation for Architecture. This is the 5th year of this event, which began in 2016 from a desire to introduce our amazing Design Awards jurors to the community. We always invite a prestigious group of design professionals to Austin to judge our design awards, but they don't get to meet our people. Tonight, you'll get just a taste of the kind of work that they do and their design philosophies. I want to thank our four wonderful jurors today, and our dear friend Erin Seaward, who's the editor of Texas Architect, for being with us tonight and being game to do this presentation from all of their respective homes. In previous years, we've been able to have a drink and some snacks together at Jury Conversations. In lieu of that this year, please join us after this event in our after party Zoom meeting, where you can grab your own drink and join our jurors for a chat. Thanks to Dunaway for supporting the after party, and the link is in the chat. And now, before I bring our Design Award Committee chairs in to introduce our jury, I want to thank the AIA Austin staff, our Design Awards Committee, and our Design Award and Honor Award sponsors. Our Honor Award underwriters are Austin Concrete Development, Dalglish Construction Company, Encotech Engineering, Foursquare Builders, Rogers O'Brien Construction, and Melva Watley, Honorable TXA. Platinum sponsor Pilgrim Building, after party sponsor Dunaway, gold sponsors American Constructors, Braun and Butler Construction, Exclusive Windows and Doors of Austin, and Thomas Printworks. Thanks to you all. And now let me introduce the 2020 Design Awards Committee chairs, Denise Hudak, AIA, and Nikos Papadopoulos. Denise?
Welcome everyone to AIA Austin 2020 Design Awards. I'm Denise Hudak, Chair of the Design Awards Committee, and know that by being here, you are now officially part of what will surely be the most memorable edition of these awards to date. I'm incredibly grateful for every one of you, from the jurors to the public at large that joined us today, but particularly for our AIA Austin staff and the entire awards committee that has been working so hard for a whole year to make this happen. So then COVID came knocking on our door and we pivoted, we rallied, we had to make this happen. Yes, I am sure our priorities have changed, just like our life has in the past 3 months, but architecture isn't going anywhere. In fact, now more than ever, it is essential that we as a profession take our place and use our particular skill set to reshape this new world we're coming out into. We must continue to serve our communities as we always have. We must continue to address today's problems with bold new solutions. I, for one, have no doubt that the Austin design community and our AIA membership is already making strides in that direction. So thank you for joining us this year. We'll review this year's submissions with a fresh new perspective, an exceptional group of jurors, and continue to celebrate design excellence from the capital city in Texas. Nikos, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nikos Papadopoulos, Chair-elect of the Design Awards Committee. And I'm very excited to welcome everyone to our virtual gathering. I've been participating in the awards committee for 4 years now, and I can easily say that the Jury Conversations is by far my favorite event of the program, which is dedicated to celebrating design excellence in Austin. For anyone who's curious about what makes a design excellent, I think this evening presents a unique opportunity to engage in conversation with a diverse group of accomplished jurors from across the country and break the code of that deceptively simple question. for me, this is one of the most meaningful conversations to be had. And the fact that this event is open to the public makes it even more significant for everyone driven by or simply interested in learning what drives design excellence. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to learning more about who our jurors are, how they approach design, and what is it that they'll be looking for in this year's entries. Denise?
You're muted.
Muted, Denise.
So, yes. All right. Now, let me introduce the jurors. Kathleen McGuigan is editor-in-chief of Architectural Record, the nation's leading architecture publication for 127 years. Under her leadership, Record has won the Grand Neal Award, the Top American Business Media Award for Overall Excellence, among other numerous awards. In addition, she oversaw the launch of Record's Women in Architecture Design Leadership Annual Awards Program in 2014 to recognize the contributions of women in the profession. It is the only honor of its kind in the US. Kathleen is a former architecture critic, the arts editor of Newsweek, and she taught at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism and has been a Poynter Fellow at Yale. Kathleen, thank you for joining us. Now, Patricia Rhee, FAIA, is a partner at Ehrlich, Yanai, Rhee, Cheney Architects, where she has practiced for 20 years. She is the recipient of the 2017 Culver City Women in Business Council Visionary Award, and was also a founding co-chair of the AIA Los Angeles Women in Architecture Committee. In 2015, her firm received the National AIA Firm Award, one of the industry's highest honors. Her project experience ranges from civic to institutional and commercial developments of all scales and multiple delivery methods, including design build. Patricia, thank you for joining us as well.
Okay, I'll take it from here. Based in Chicago, Margaret Kavanaugh, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret. AIA, she's the principal of interior architecture at Studio Gang. Margaret has lectured at the University of Pennsylvania Women in Design Symposium and was recently published in Women Rebuild Stories Polemic Futures, a book of reflections on the renewal of feminist thought in architecture, excuse me. She was recently appointed to the Dean's Advisory Board at UVA's School of Architecture and is currently a lecturer on professional practice for the school's graduate program. Our fourth juror for the night, Frank Zilm, a fellow of AIA, serves as a Chester Dean Lecturer on Healthcare Design in the School of Architecture, Health and Wellness program at the University of Kansas School of Architecture and Design. Healthcare Design magazine selected Frank as the top educator in 2013. He has worked within major healthcare architectural firms, teaching hospitals, and for the past 30 years has held his own consulting firm where he has executed over 350 planning and programming studies. Frank is an active contributor to the healthcare community, authoring numerous papers, regularly teaching at Harvard School of Design's executive program. Denise?
Here we go. And finally, our moderator, Aaron Seaward. Aaron would like, Seward, sorry. Aaron would like you to think he's a great train robber, but actually he's the editor-in-chief of Texas Architect magazine and a wonderful writer and editor. And now let's get started. Ingrid has control of the slide advance, so just please let us know when you like the next slide. Thank you all so much for joining us. Cheers.
Okay. Ingrid, do you like me to start or? Great, okay. Well, a good evening, just what you wanted, another Zoom meeting. I really wish I could be there with you. I had the privilege to come down to Austin last year to speak at South by Southwest and fell in love with your city and was looking forward to coming back. So hopefully I have another opportunity. I'm honored to be asked to serve on this jury and somewhat humbled with the introduction of the other speakers, other panelists. So what I'd like to do is just give you a quick thumbnail of what I've been involved with recently and then there's question and answers, we'd be glad to answer them. I've really had a dual path in my career. For 40 years, I had my own planning and programming firm dealing in healthcare, as alluded to earlier, and I'll come back to that. But over the last 10 years, I've shifted over into academia. And just to clarify, the picture on the left there is not commencement this year, but it very well could have been commencement this year. It was a very sad experience. I always tell my friends and the students that I think one of the problems of our profession is we don't celebrate our successes enough. And graduation is clearly one of those milestones. So it's unfortunate that the students weren't able to experience this year, but they'll have other opportunities. And I hope all of you that have submitted for the entries for the jurying will take an opportunity to step back and reflect on what you've done and the successes you've had. And irregardless of what our jury decides, I hope you appreciate the accomplishments that you've made in your career. Now, our healthcare program really tries to expose students to some of the incredibly functional, detailed issues related to healthcare, where you're dealing with technology, you're dealing with function, and you're dealing with human needs. We work a lot with industry, but we also try to expose them to larger societal issues. So the center picture is a heart hospital in Western Kenya with a missionary hospital we worked with for over 10 years. And as a teacher, what's exciting is to see the students, some of the students that worked on this went to work for the architectural firm and are now out in Bomet, Kenya, watching their project getting built. And the project on the far right is a prototype for a rammed earth design build project that 6 of our students went down to Haiti and worked with the birthing center down there to try to help them to be able to help the community deal with disaster events. Next, we go to the next slide. One of the areas that I've been interested in quite a bit, you know, in my career, I'm old if you haven't figured that out yet, but I've lived through lead pencils and sandpaper, rapidographs, letter press-ons, key punch cards, and computers. And so there's been a lot of change that has been going on in our industry and how we deliver architecture. But the one thing that's been constant over that whole thing is the idea of creativity. And I've been very interested in exploring the issue, what is creativity and how do we achieve it and what are the key characteristics about that. And so I'm trained as an architect, but one of the nice things about being in a university environment is you can collaborate with people that are really interested in and knowledgeable in these fields. So I've learned a lot. We have been involved in looking at a study of the creative characteristics of healthcare architects and comparing it to a 1959 study that some of you may have heard of. There was a 2016 book that was published by Pierluigi Sirioni called The Creative Architect, where they looked at a study that was done in 1959 at UC Berkeley of the top creative architects of that period. I.M. Pei, Philip Johnson, Eero Saarinen. I mean, they got the stars. And they looked at their personality characteristics. We were able to get that data from that 1959 study and look at it today and say, what's the same and what's changed? And let me just make one little side note. The 1959 study had no women. Our study does. And so that was one of the things we were interested in, is are there stronger strengths that a gender could present? But we gave the number of tests, the number of characteristics, Myers-Briggs, Big Five, RAT, and architectural creativity. And I can go back into this if there's questions and answers. A couple of things we found. If you compare us to the general population, we're Martians. You know, I joke that we are introverted, intuitive, and if you compare us, it's like a Venn diagram with no overlap. We look at the world differently, and that's what our strength is. We can invent something out of nothing. Whereas our clients aren't used to necessarily always thinking that way. So we've got to be very careful to make sure the clients understand how we think and recognize that that's our strength. The other thing is that what really differentiates the most creative people is the ability to suspend the judgment. And if you look at the studies of those 59 architects and you look at the studies we did, the ability to suspend and wait and do what's called divergent thinking is critical to get to that unique solution. So creativity, in the definition of the psychologist, is it's innovative and applicable. It's got to be both innovative and applicable. And so when I look at the lens of what I'm going to be looking at as a jury member, I'm going to be using those 2 criteria. So if you could go to the next slide. Just a couple of follow-up points, and then I don't know, I've probably gone over my 7 minutes of fame here, so I'll make this short. I have worked with some very creative people, and the thing I have seen in a very complex field like healthcare is that the key characteristics is the ability not only to be personally talented, but to collaborate and establish trust. And some of the projects I've worked on here at the University of Cincinnati, Princeton Medical Center, I really appreciated their success and how they were able to collaborate. So it's not, I think that the study of the individual architect as a creative architect really doesn't get the full picture. It's got to be a creative team and the ability to manage a creative team. The last thing I just wanted to talk about a bit, because it's topical right now, is I was able to work with the Dallas office of HKS on in 2008 on what was called the All Risk Ready study, to look at how you could design an emergency room to deal with any surge event, including pandemics. And if you go to the next slide, we did some of the most creative work I've ever been involved in. We published reports, we made presentations, and I would say to a large degree, we were ignored. The project on the right is one of the few that I worked on. It's an emergency room at Tampa General. It can expand from 77 treatment spaces to 270 inside the same space, and it can deal with pandemics. But unfortunately, as I think we've all seen in terms of how our society and how different parts of our country have tried to respond, very few institutions and systems were designed to respond to that. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to contribute to doing something other than putting a tent in a parking lot as designers, and working with our communities to make them adaptive and responsive to any multiple events. So I'm looking forward to working with the jury, and looking forward to seeing your entries and to learning.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patty Ree. I'm with Ehrlich United. I'm a partner at Ehrlich United Cheney Architects. We're out of Los Angeles in Culver City, California. And this is our group. We actually have two offices, one in the mothership is in LA, and then we have a smaller office in San Francisco. The office was formerly known as Ehrlich Architects, and that's Stephen Ehrlich standing next to me. He's the founding partner, and then Takashi and I and Matthew Cheney are the other partners in our office. And I like this photo because it kind of says a lot about our group. We're kind of looking in all different directions and doing our own thing, but we're also having a lot of fun together. Just a couple of things about myself. You know, some themes in my work. I'm actually interested in a lot of things, but what does rise to the top is bringing people together in light and space, creating spaces for community, and creating a holistic vibe. And that's by integrating graphics and landscaping into spaces. So the first project I wanted to share was the John Emeril Courthouse. This was a federal design build courthouse project that we did in Yuma, Arizona. We won this in a competition, and it was designing to an extreme desert climate. And Yuma is actually known as the sunniest place on earth. So we offered as a gift to the community this photovoltaic canopy, kind of a symbol of the federal government to the community. Next slide. This view is taken from below the canopy in our outdoor room. We basically created our own microclimate in the shade. All sorts of wildlife have emerged, like hummingbirds and butterflies that flit around. We created this processional bridge that weaves in and out of these sandstone walls. Those walls actually serve a function of being security barriers for oncoming vehicles, for safety reasons. But we're very careful to integrate them into the landscape. And in this image, just showing you a bit about the materials, we picked a local sandstone. We really wanted to blend into the sandy desert ground that was everywhere. These massive walls, they read very monolithically, and they contrast with the weathered steel trellises and the window boxes on the other facades. The grapevines and the delicate branches of the Palo Verde trees, those are also part of the palette. And the next project I want to share was the Stoneview Nature Center, also a design build competition where we had an interesting collaboration, not only with the contractor, but with the exhibition artist, the graphic artist, and Omnivore and the landscape architect Abe. And also we were incorporating the work of civic artist Fallen Fruit. And that was a first to actually collaborate with an artist during a competition. And it was definitely an interesting process. What you see here is a part T where we're actually opening up the arms of the community center, turning it kind of inside out, where you're creating this outdoor rooms where people can make and cook and teach, do yoga. And these arms actually open up into the entire edible garden. The actual site was a contaminated oil field, and there was something very poetic about taking something that was abandoned and really kind of an eyesore and turning it into something that was really a blessing for the people that lived nearby and was fruitful and productive. And this image just shows the, in the foreground, that's the custom wallpaper that Fallen Fruit had designed. And you see these little pops of color. Really, you don't understand that color pop until you get really close to the building. And then it's like this kind of feeling of delight and surprise. And the panoramic views all the way around. And then this next slide is just showing some of the projects that I'm working on locally in Culver City. I really have a thing about working locally. That's really important to me. I have 2 kids, and I find that the more local the project, the more interested I am in getting it or doing it, because that means I get to spend more time designing and also being with my family. So the one on the left is a project called the Culver Steps. It's actually in the heart of our downtown. And it's funny because it's a commercial space. It's where Amazon Studios, their offices are located, and then retail all the way on the ground level. But because of its location, being in the heart of the city, it is very civic. And it's interesting because staff often sometimes complain about like commercial projects. I don't know why they poo-poo it, because I think it's great, because I feel like you cannot get any more civic than a project like this, where you're creating spaces for the community to come together that are pedestrian and that are really bringing something to the surrounding the surrounding city vibe. And then the project on the right is a few blocks away, also in Culver City. It's an office building for Ivy Station, and it was really a study in how to maximize a footprint, maximize daylight and views, but also shielding the western sun so that it didn't bring too much solar heat gain into the space by cleverly, or by angling the glass. And the last project I want to share is something that's currently under construction. It's one of my favorite projects because it's a huge LA Times former printing plant. I think the ability to recycle buildings is one of, I think that's the best thing one can do as an architect. Instead of building from ground up, you're actually recycling the entire building and making it into an interesting space that can have new life and live on. And so the way we do this was taking really large wholesale cuts into the building to create really dramatic spaces. It already did have like super dramatic cantilevers and tall column-free spaces, but creating these carve-outs to create what became entry spaces, open air lobbies, or gathering, like the filling station becomes like a gathering meeting space. And so in the next image, you can see the construction photo where it's already starting to carve out, and you can start to get an idea of like what that open air lobby is going to feel like. And the scale of it is almost like the scale of an earthwork project or like a Gordon Matta Clark installation. So that's it for me.
Hi there. You can go to the next slide, Ingrid. I'm Margaret, and as identified, I'm a principal at Studio Gang Architects, and we are a firm of about 140 people with 4 different offices. I am based in the Chicago office, but as principal of interior architecture, I do visit and collaborate with all of the teams in all of the different projects. I've been with the firm for about 15 years, and we were about 10 people then. Now we're about 140 people. And our 4th office is actually in Paris. I think we need to figure out how to get its slide onto this. You can go to the next slide. Our work encompasses projects as diverse as creating a boardwalk and a pavilion in Lincoln Park Zoo that helps support diversity of flora and fauna and create a living, learning landscape in the middle of the city, bringing a little bit of wilderness back to the city. Projects such as Aqua, which is pretty recognizable by this point. It was one of the first projects I worked on at Studio Gang. And extending into projects like the Gilder Center for Science, Education and Innovation at American Museum of Natural History, which is currently under construction, which will create a new entrance on the west side of the building and complete the master plan originally designed. And in doing so, develop and connect, create a new heart of the museum and connect galleries, both new and old, and create new spaces for learning, and really develop the American Museum of Natural History into a 21st century for learning space. You could go to the next. We also have delved into projects in terms of thinking about our cities. Our motto is, our mission statement is that we help cities, people and organizations design their futures. And so these are projects that look at things on a much more urban scale, from projects such as Polish Station, which was about talking to people, and a project to think about how to make our police and judiciary systems less scary, and how to connect people with them and develop new ways of communicating and speaking to one another. Do projects such as the Sea Home Waterfront concept. So probably you are well versed in the intake building there on Lady Bird Lake. And so we've developed a number of concepts for how we can reimagine the intake building, literally the building, but then also the traverse around Lady Bird Lake, and make it into quite a community asset. Next slide. I focus a lot of my work on projects that are at a very human scale. I'm very interested in how people interact in a space and with a variety of materials, and have worked on projects such as the Maisonette, which took 2 floors at the bottom of an existing building and cut out big structural slabs and inserted a new piano floor into the middle, a passerelle, sort of a mezzanine level in the middle of the space. And it gave us an opportunity to source chandeliers, design furniture, really delve into the detailing of almost down to the soap dish of a particular space. And then other projects like the project in the middle, where we've designed furniture, to projects such as Solstice on the Park, where we have taken the south side of the facade looking over the Museum of Science and Industry of this particular building in Hyde Park in Chicago, and have tilted the facade to keep sun out in the summer but allow sun in the winter, and in doing so create terraces that the unit owners can enjoy year-round. Next slide. And we also think about and delve into exhibits, temporary projects such as Hive in Washington, D.C., which used tightly wound paper tubes to create space within the National Building Museum's large vaulted space, and played with what is play and how do people use space, but then also looked at the acoustic properties created by making spaces within the larger space of the Building Museum. Next slide. This is a close-up, a little bit of Solstice on the Park, the amenity space. One of the things that was exciting about this particular project was that all of the amenities are on the ground level, so very visible to passersby, really connecting the occupants to the community around it, and creating, using, antique pieces, vintage pieces, a tree that was on site, cut it down, a cottonwood tree on site, cut it down to make furniture, and reuse it in other ways throughout the building. Next slide. And one of the most exciting parts of the building is when you can get out into a unit and really look out over the city and know that you have these amazing terraces, really almost doubling the living space in many cases, but also making it a very sustainable facade. Next slide. Another image of the Maisonette. I guess it's the same image that was on the previous slide. But this one was particularly exciting for the ability to look at steel and look at the very malleable properties of steel and think about how we could use it, whether it's creating the frame around a glass rail or using water jet to cut it, or framing the mezzanine. This one was completed in about 2009, I think, 10. Next slide. And then the offices of the Guggenheim. They have roughly 24 different departments that work together. And so the project here at One Liberty Plaza was designed to connect all of the different departments and help make the work visible to each other and to visitors, and make the important work that the exhibit managers and exhibit designers and the curators do quite visible and readily accessible. Next slide. And then smaller scale projects such as the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership, which is about 10,000 square foot space on the campus of Kalamazoo College, where we looked at what social justice is and how people convene and talk and meet, and can they do it one-on-one, person to person. Can you inhabit a space such as around the fireplace in a you know, or at the kitchen, which you see in the background there, because so much about social justice and culture, exchange of culture, happens around the breaking of bread or in informal situations. And can you also hold much, much larger convenings to promote social justice, all basically within one singular space on the Northwest campus, the core of the campus. And it was a very exciting project to work on because we're making visible what has often been in social justice very invisible, or happening in back alleys or in basements or hidden away from public. And so we've tried to make it very transparent, and had the opportunity of a greatly sloping site to position the building in the canopies of trees and looking out onto the grove behind. And then a couple images of the Sea Home from the concept study that we did, looking at, you know, from the Ladybird Lake vista, looking into the intake and thinking how we could reimagine this immense, you know, very, very strong structure and make it work for on a community level, on a you know, park activity level, through day and night in different seasons of Austin. So there's an exterior view and an inside reimagining it. Some of you may have been in it. I had the opportunity to go in it when we were there a year or so ago. It's immense. I mean, the water that must have been drawn through here and the concrete that was used just to hold back and support all that water is incredible. So the opportunity to be able to rethink it and figure out how it can be activated on a park level, recreation level, community level is very, very exciting to us.
Hello, everyone. I'm really sorry to not actually be in Texas. I always like an excuse to visit, and I'm very sorry not to be with my fellow jurors in person. What you're looking at now, though, is I just want to take a moment to pay a bit of tribute to a really wonderful Texas architect who I was fortunate to call a friend. When I was a fledgling design journalist, I learned so much from him. His name was Frank Welch. He died in Dallas 3 years ago, almost exactly this time of year at 90. And this is a project called The Birthday, which I'm sure you in Texas know about, even though unfortunately it is no longer in the state in which he built it. A seemingly simple hunting shelter built in West Texas that was so revered by his architecture peers that it was given the 25-year award by Texas Architects in 1997 with the Kimball Museum. It was essentially a tie, so they gave it to both of them. You know, Frank Welch and his mentor O'Neill Ford were exemplars of what was then called regional modernism, which I always thought was a bit of a backhanded compliment. I sometimes think that if Frank had been born later, he might have been more widely appreciated beyond Texas for his sensitivity to place and materials, you know, what we now call context, and values that have rightly elevated, you know, such regional architects as Lake Flato in Texas or Marlon Blackwell in Arkansas to kind of national acclaim. Anyway, I just want to say a word about Frank, but I'm here to talk about architectural record. Next slide, please. So this is, as Denise said, architectural record's old. This is the first issue on the right from 1991 and 1891, excuse me. And it had a kind of something for everyone. It wasn't even just for architects then. I mean, it did have an article called Some Common Facts About Plumbing. It did have an article called Fads in Architecture, but it was also interspersed with poems written by the editor. And I am sparing our readers any poetry by me these days. And over the years, the magazine was really pioneering in certain ways. For one thing, for using photography and printing. It did that very early. They had wonderful writers, including Frank Lloyd Wright, who was a regular contributor, and its look kept changing. Next slide. So you can see this was sort of a 1960s, this is sort of a 1990s, and then we kind of get up to where we are today. Now, it was always available internationally. If you can look in there, this is a newsstand in South America, and you can kind of see Architectural Record tucked in there with Mad Magazine. Of course, nowadays we hardly have newsstands, but the monthly magazine is still the core of a larger enterprise that now includes a robust daily news website, a big social media presence led by a rapidly growing number of Instagram followers. We have the largest online continuing education center, larger than even the national AIA, as well as webinars, an annual innovation conference, and regional symposia that we call Record on the Road, which we have brought to Austin. But whether accessed in print or digitally, Record continues to focus on the best contemporary architecture, from the annual Record Houses issue to schools, skyscrapers, universities, healthcare, hospitality, and much more. Slide, please. This is the current issue, which features a really stunning new project by Grafton Architects, the Dublin-based firm founded by Yvonne Farrell and Shelley McNamara, who are the winners of this year's Pritzker Prize. They are the first women partners to be so honored. This is for the Toulouse School of Economics. The architects created a really extraordinary sort of multi-layered structure that connects to the historic urban surroundings in its scale and its circulation. It has many vantage points where you can look out to the old city, and it's clad in a kind of long, thin, local brick that's very beautiful and kind of soft. The two architects say the brick looks so great, it looks almost edible, like a biscuit. Record is, I believe, the last American design publication to send an expert writer to every major project we cover. We believe in the journalistic integrity of being on site, and we believe in the experience of architecture, not just the image of architecture. Unfortunately, with this Grafton project, our correspondent's trip to France was canceled due to the pandemic, but he did know the architects worked very well, and he knew the city of Toulouse, and so we got quite a wonderful piece from him nonetheless, but we are all itching to travel again soon to see new buildings. So in addition to such in-depth project coverage, Record increasingly reports on issues central to the profession. And not long after I joined the magazine as editor 9 years ago, we began a lengthy project researching women in architecture, ultimately producing this special issue in 2013. Could I have the next slide, please? It featured exemplary work designed by women. Women architects told us they did not want to be called women architects, just architects, and we wanted to honor women by showing their work. This is a really beautiful gallery, freestanding gallery in New York City by Annabelle Seldorf on the cover. But we also reported on the experiences and obstacles faced by many women in advancing the profession. Now, mind you, this is 7 years ago, but one of the most disturbing statistics we unearthed then in our research came from the US Department of Labor. Of the 50 professions tracked by the government, architecture ranked last with the highest percentage of women leaving the field between the ages of 35 and 44. So think about that a minute. It seemed to be a striking instance of the difficulty of balancing work if you were trying to start a family. And with women accounting for nearly half of architecture school graduates, that was just a terrible waste of talent and training. I certainly think since we did this issue, the profession has begun to change. There's a much greater level of activism. I think the Me Too movement has been really important, and certainly opening of channels to leadership at some large firms. And certainly we're seeing that with the jurors tonight. In 2014, as Denise mentioned, we launched the Women in Architecture Awards. It's the only honor of its kind in the United States. We have an independent jury. We select 5 design leaders each year and then celebrate them in the autumn with a forum and awards ceremony. The first year, Meryl Elam of Mac Skaga and Meryl Elam Architects in Atlanta was honored as design leader. Could we have the next slide? We had published this project Scoggin Elam's Courthouse here in Austin in our women's issue. And interestingly and terribly, it became a lightning rod and a big news story earlier this year that Architectural Record broke on February 4th, when I reported that there was a proposed executive order circulating in the White House that would dictate that, quote, the classical architectural style shall be the preferred and default style for new and upgraded federal buildings. I had obtained a draft of that order, and it had condemned the GSA's Design Excellence Program, and it cited the Austin Courthouse as one of several federal projects that the anonymous author of this order deemed had, quote, little aesthetic appeal. Well, the response to Record Story was explosive. More than 11,000 architects wrote in protest to the White House at the behest of AIA National and many of your local chapters. Record Story was picked up by news outlets from Los Angeles to London. Even organizations such as the Institute for Classical Architecture really objected to the idea of any official government style, as our subsequent reporting pointed out. So that proposed executive order, that's just one kind of news that we try to stay on top of, but of course that seems to have gone dormant for now. Certainly the country has much, much bigger problems to face. We have continued to cover such urgent issues as the housing crisis. Could we see the next slide, please? We did this in 2018 with the climate crisis, which is ongoing. And now in this current climate, we have been aggressively reporting on the implications of COVID and including the efforts of so many architects. Could I have the next slide, please? This is from our website. So many architects who have worked to create urgently needed temporary facilities. Frank mentioned that. Also adapting existing healthcare facilities. And we've also featured I want to talk to Frank later about the HKS project, but some hospitals which were designed to expand in an emergency pandemic. And we are going to continue to obviously report on this and also on the severe economic fallout on the architecture and construction communities. So while we are all living in a grip of enormous uncertainty right now, I think we also see the skills that those of you in architecture possess that can help grapple with the really deep social, economic, and racial inequities in housing, healthcare, and other services that the pandemic has sharply amplified. This devastating tragedy to me is, maybe I'm being a little too hopeful, maybe an opportunity to recalibrate our priorities to try to create a healthier, safer, and far more socially just world. Thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for your presentations. They were all great, and I have a list of questions for you all. I'm going to go in order of presenter, and since we only have 10 minutes for this part of the Q&A, I'll give you each one question.
Okay.
So Frank, starting with you, I was quite interested to hear about your research into the creativity of the architect and your characterization of architects as Martians, as being differently from others. And you know, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that is, wow, that really must make it difficult to communicate your ideas to, you know, the man with the spreadsheet who's like actually funding the project. And I'm wondering if you have any follow-up on that as to how to build the trust that you spoke about to start the collaboration to get the ideas across.
Well, that's an excellent question, and it is a dilemma, because if you look at some of the tools, and in the psychology field, like every other field, has arguments about what's the best tool, but Myers-Briggs has been the oldest one and gives us a chance to look back to those earlier studies. But architects primarily are INTJs, introverts, intuitors, thinkers, and judgmental. And that's about 5% of the general population of the United States, less than 5% of the population. Most of the population are extroverts, and what that means is not that we're shy. It means that we get our psychological reward out of thinking things in our mind, whereas the extroverts trying to get what gets their juices going is engaging with other people. And although there's sensors, and so I always argue, if I want to go see a doctor, I want an extrovert and I want a censor. I do not want an introvert as a doctor. So I think the challenge for us is to understand how our clients tend to approach the world, and to the degree feasible, be able to communicate in that way and establish trust. There was a very famous little monograph that came out several years ago called The Trusted Advisor. And we are, in fact, advisors to our clients. And it said there's three basic dimensions. There's competency. Can you demonstrate you know what you're doing? Is there reliability? Can you be counted on to do what they're doing, to do what you're going to do? And is there intimacy? Are you really willing to say what you're going to think? And all those three things make sense. But the key issue in establishing trust is you take that whole thing and you divide it by self-interest. And the more you are perceived as being involved for self-interest, it doesn't matter what the top part of that equation is, you're not going to be able to establish a trusting work relationship. So the way that you can communicate to your client that you understand them, you understand how they work, you understand what their needs are, and if you can establish that trust, and I'm sure my other jurors have lived through this, you establish that trust, then you're going to get the latitude to look at ideas and look at things in a way that really gets your creative opportunities together. But you've got to establish that trust. So it's a tricky question, and I don't really know how many architects really appreciate the unique skills they have and the unique abilities they have, and how they need to make sure that they're understanding how their clients work and think.
Well, one characteristic that I often associate with successful architects is charm, actually, as a kind of way to break the ice and woo the client. And so moving on to our next panelist, Patty, I'd like to kind of keep this conversation about communication and wooing a client going. Could you speak about from your experience how to have those difficult conversations or get a difficult part of a proposal past an obstinate client?
Wow. Yeah, that's a long conversation right there. Yeah, I think the client relationship is so important, and especially when you're kind of starting out or you're earlier in your career, so eager to like take on anything, you kind of lose sight of that. But I feel like the best projects are the ones where you do have that good understanding and trust with your client, and there's like mutual respect. And as I gain experience and become older, I value that so much. And you realize like life's too short for bad clients. That's what I tell my staff. That's what I tell my clients too. Like, who has time? Buildings are such long endeavors, and we're not just providing a service. We're having relationships with these people over years, even after a project is done. We care so much about the kind of spaces that and how they're using them and how they live with them and evolve with them, that I think that's kind of one of the great and special things about being an architect, that we are able to have those kind of relationships. Yeah.
And so there might be a bit of voting with your feet in a way, walk away from a difficult project, perhaps. Do you think is that something that's necessary for architects to do?
No clients are listening, but so honestly, like I had never done that until the past year. And I mean, I've been working for a while, and there's a feeling of total relief and empowerment that comes with doing that, because you're doing something not only because of what you believe, but for your staff, or it could be a variety of reasons, but kind of in your gut, like if you're doing something that is in alignment with your values or if it's not. And then when you act on that, that's really very empowering.
Wonderful, thank you. Margaret, to continue this line of conversation, I wonder if having a superstar like Jeannie Gang as the principal of your firm, is it all a benefit in terms of wooing clients and making proposals that might be difficult to pass in another way?
I think at this point, because of Jeannie's stature and the way that her star has risen and the firm has grown, it certainly helps us have entree into different kinds of projects that, years and years ago we might not have been able to consider. But I think then, though, that Jeannie's very genuine, very personable. And I think that's one of the things that people first learn, and clients in particular, learn about her and about the way she works. And she just, rolls up her sleeves, digs in, and is very approachable. And I think that people who have worked with her and know how she works and how we work in the office, that is one of the hallmarks you'll see of, a Studio Gang project.
One of the things that really jumped out to me about the projects that you showed was in the Arcus Center in Kalamazoo. It looks like there's a conversation pit in that project, and I'm wondering, are conversation pits coming back? That was one of my favorite features of 70s architecture.
Yeah, well, maybe they are, because I mean, there's real benefits to it, right? Because it makes a smaller space within the bigger space, and we studied how different cultures, think of social justice in coming to the design of this project. We had no preconceived notion of what the building would like. Neither did the college, right? So it was really amazing to work with them and to figure out together what we wanted this project to be. And it became very clear early on that many cultures think about, their how they govern themselves, seated or facing one another, or sharing around a circle, or around the culture of breaking bread, or over a fireplace, or all of those different permutations. And so that we felt that sort of informal and intimate space needed to be at the core of this project. And it's actually wood burning fireplace in a college campus. And we were able to get, the college was able to get their insurance company to believe that this was a necessity for the project. So it was, it's at the middle of the basically Y-shaped building. And it's really at the core of the project and the core of our thinking about how social justice needed to be revealed in this particular project. So yeah, let's hope that, versions of that come back in other projects, but not from because of 70s.
Right, well, okay. Kathleen, the magazines function as a conversation pit of sorts. Certainly.
Good segue, Aaron.
Thank you. They certainly stoke conversation, and that's part of the purpose of the magazine, professional and otherwise. You mentioned about Record's practice of always sending an editor to review the buildings that appear in the magazine, and how that's kind of become a thing of the past for most magazines, whereas that used to be kind of common for magazines to open up the budget to have travel. So I'd really like to know how Record has managed to keep that going all this time.
Please don't tell the people who own the magazine. They have just no idea what it's, they just assume we've always done it this way, so we will. You know, I'm serious. It's every major project. It's not every project, but we do have correspondence pretty much in most parts of the world. So we kind of do the math, and it depends if one of us goes. It depends if somebody's nearby who's really knowledgeable. But so far, our publishers supported us in this, and sometimes, once in a while, we can't. I can remember, a project we once did in Africa, and there was a country that State Department said you should absolutely not go to, but it was kind of an incredibly beautiful project. So sometimes we have a workaround. We don't do it for every small project, but for the big major projects, we really try to, for the reasons I said. We want to convey the experience of space and the context too. One of the things that we've tried to do and push, and you've noticed it, I think, more in Record in the last years, I hope, because I made a big thing about it, is you always see the building somewhere in this. You always see the city. You always get some sense of what's around it. It's not about a little close-up object. And so these are things that we really want to emphasize in our coverage.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say something to Frank, that I was very proud that we had published. I learned about that creativity book before it came out, and we published the excerpt of it in record in a special issue we did on creativity in 2016 that was so interesting. And we also did we had somebody do a lot of research with neuroscientists and so forth about what we really know about creativity, which is actually, I mean, I want to read your piece now about healthcare. It's actually not as much as you might like. I mean, people have been trying to unlock the key to creativity. But I will say this, those 40 architects, they were all completely neurotic. I mean, oh my God, they had mother issues. They had,
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure that isn't true about architects today, but I mean, this was a really, when you scrape the surface, not very far, all of those famous architects really had some issues.
Oh, it is a fascinating read. I'd highly recommend the book, The Creative Architect. It came out in 2016.
Yeah.
And they did biographical sketches of all of these individual architects, along with the personality profiles. And one of their conclusions was that they were highly neurotic. That was one of the whole group.
Yeah, they're pretty much borderline crazy. Anyway, but they did beautiful work. Sorry, Aaron, I didn't mean to digress.
No, this was all interesting digression. So we are 2 minutes to 6 o'clock, and we kind of promised the audience we would open it up to questions. I don't see any thing in my Q&A box. If there are any questions from the audience, please send it right now. And otherwise, you'll get to speak to the jurors directly during happy hour, supposedly. Ingrid, is that correct?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet.
That is correct.
Yeah. So yeah, the questions are not flying in. So let's save them for happy hour.
I see a question.
We got one. This is a question from one of our members, or one of AIA's members. What to the whole jury as a whole, and everyone can feel free to answer. What are you hoping to learn in reviewing the work of Austin architects?
Well, I think I tipped my hand a little bit in showing, and I think we've also seen this in the work that the 3 architects showed, but I'm really interested in how work connects to the place where it's designed, how it connects to the climate, the locale, the materials, the history.
And as I mentioned briefly, when I think of creativity, I think of innovative and applicable. So is it a new idea, and does it really solve a problem? Or does it meet a need? It may be an aesthetic need, it may be a functional need, but I'm going to be looking to see what I can learn about how your creative community addressed the different submissions.
We have another question, and I'll put this one to you. Our questioner loves Frank Welch, as we all do, and would like to ask the panel, what other architecture do you love and consider timeless?
That's a tough question.
It doesn't have to be Texas architecture.
Well, I would have to confess that I'm still a romantic that goes for, I love Frank Lloyd Wright's work, and I know that may be corny, but when I look at his ability to go to big ideas down to detail, it just still fascinates me.
I'm particularly fond of the work of Lina Bobardi, and the expressive, very fluid use of concrete in her projects, and just amazing work.
I love just the stuff you see when you drive around, some of the stuff by contemporary architects and by architects you don't even know about. But in LA, there's, we don't even think of our city as being very historic, but just the legacy of the case study houses is something that I appreciate a lot.
Kathleen, I guess you already said Frank Welch.
Well, I already gave you, I have to say I have extremely broad architectural tastes. I mean, I think it's about a kind of authenticity within the idea and appropriateness and beautiful detailing and materials. So I'm very loath as a journalist to play favorites. But if you've been following me for a few years, you'll know some architects I really like a lot.
I have to make a quick plug for Texas Architect, obviously not a national level magazine like yours, Kathleen. However, here on the state level, we also send a reviewer to every major project that we cover. So
That is fantastic and really important.
Very much believe in that as being essential to getting a sense of the architecture if you're going to actually make a statement about it. Okay, guys, we're a little over our time, and I think it's time to move to the happy hour room.
Okay.
Ingrid, do you want to direct us? There's a different link. Is that correct?
That's right. I hope everyone got the link in the chat. If anyone didn't, send a Q&A or just tell us in the chat that you didn't get it, and we'll post it again. Thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you, Aaron, for being here. This is fun. I didn't think it would be so fun, but it is. I wish we could be together in person, but this is the next best thing, and you didn't have to drive and park, and there was no traffic, so that's really good. I hope you'll join us in the next meeting and grab a drink and have some more conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.